Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and on behalf of the Village of Cary and the Board of Zoning, Planning, and Appeals, I'd like to hereby call this meeting to order on this Thursday, February the 14th, 2019. Happy Valentine's Day, everyone. And we do now have a quorum of members, and at this time, I'd like to ask our Director of Community Development to please call the roll.
Williams. Present. Pippin. Graziano.
Here.
O'Laughlin.
Here.
Kretschmer. Jasper. And Port.
Here. Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, we invite you to rise with us for the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much, everyone. So I want to begin by saying thank you to all of you for joining us tonight. Welcome, Mr. Jasper. We have approximately 12 cases before us this evening. That's a lot for us, and we don't normally have this large of an audience, so I wanted, for the benefit of everyone involved, just step you through how our evening should progress. The first case is a continuation from several months ago for a car wash, and so we're going to hear that case first. In the way we do this, we had left the public comment section open so that there could be further comment. We didn't anticipate this many people being here. But in the back of the room where the chief is, you may have noticed the sign-in sheet, and we'd humbly ask you to sign that sheet if you want to speak during the public comment section about the car wash application or any of the other 11 items that we have on our agenda this evening. I know many of you are very interested in the UDO and some of the changes that are being made. Everyone that's here, I assure you, will be given the opportunity to speak. That's part of the process. So whoever would like to speak will be welcome to speak. Two things. Come on in, Andrew. This is my son, Andrew. He's bringing my eyeglasses so I can see. So thank you very much, Andrew.
I could have loaned you my readers.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you.
And he wore a Patriots jersey, really?
Thank you. That's my son. Thank you, Andrew. So the way the process works is that we're going to review the applications one after the other, and then the way it works is that Mr. Simmons gives us an overview of each of the applications, and then for the applicant, in this case it's going to be related to the UDO, we may have questions, and then we open it up to the public yourselves. And if you do decide to speak, we humbly ask that you simply state your name and address for the record, because it is videotaped. For those of you that don't know, all of our proceedings, thank you very much, Chief, gets recorded, so people that can't attend can watch it at a later date. So that's part of the Open Meetings Act, and we try to be transparent. And then we close the public section of the meeting. The members may have questions amongst themselves about the particular case being called. We take a vote, and then that vote gets delivered back to our elected officials. So that's our process. So before I begin, I just want to double check if anyone has any questions. We tend to be an open-minded group at this dais, so I just want to make sure that we're helping everyone understand how this is going to proceed. There are 12 cases. I suspect it's going to be a relatively long evening, and along the way, we'll probably take a break. So, or maybe not, Mr. Graziano. We'll see.
We'll see.
All right, so before I begin, gentlemen, any questions here? And any questions from the audience before we begin? Okay, so the first one we're going to dive into, I'm going to just simply ask Mr. Simmons to refresh everybody on the application that we were reviewing. Actually, it goes back to December. And at this time, I would like to call Village Case Number 18 ZPA 11001. This relates to the request for a map amendment in a conditional use car wash facility. Specifically, it relates to section 17.20.030 in the code, and the location is 45 Northwest Highway.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As mentioned, the request is a continuation from a hearing that we had back in December regarding the subject property and the proposed development. The petitioners taken some additional time to respond to comments that came up during that hearing. Met with the adjacent property owners to discuss those improvements or potential modifications to the plan. Just as a reminder, the property was redeveloped back in 2008, where the CVS was constructed, and then the 3 vacant parcels that are subject to the petition tonight were subsequently created The petitioner is seeking approval of a map amendment to rezone the property from B3 to B2, and then the conditional use for the car wash in that B2 zoning district. The proposal is presented previously is about a 5,000 square foot building with vehicle stacking for the car wash use. All access would be off of the existing access drive that fronts or connects to Route 14 in East Main Street, and would provide various screening from adjacent land uses. This slide here just gives more information as far as the differences between the B3 and the B2 district from a setback and lot coverage standpoint. Both districts are very similar as far as the bulk requirements for that district. Also, with the original petition, the petitioner did provide a noise study, which was done at a similar facility in another community, and that regulated or studied the noise levels that would be felt by adjacent properties at certain distances from the entrance to the car wash. The exit where the blowers would be is more located towards Route 14, which already experiences higher noise levels from traffic on that roadway. This slide shows the building elevations of the proposed structure, just as a reminder that it would have vacuum bays on the outside, but also primarily brick and stone construction with glass architectural elements. Since the previous hearing, the petitioner has made some revisions to the site plan, which is shown in this slide. The original plan is on the left-hand image, shows two curb cuts, the access drive between the property and the CVS site to the west. They are proposing to eliminate one of those access points in this location here, so all vehicular traffic that would access the car wash would need to come in through this point, transverse through the stacking bay, and then through the car wash and back out. The reason for that modification is there's some modifications to the grading on the property that you can see on the image. There are some retaining walls that are provided that would help to contain the stormwater runoff, which was the primary concern of the previous hearing on the subject property, so that the site is more self-dependent. Also, from a site revision standpoint, as you see, there used to be two stacking lanes that went through accessing the three bays. Now there's a single lane that goes through a one-way drive aisle, which again reduces the amount of pavement on the property, but also allows for more grading to take place between the two retaining walls on either side of the property, so that it limits the extent of the retaining walls. This slide, again, shows the proposed containment area for stormwater runoff as a preliminary grading plan, which the majority of the stormwater on the site will be stored in an underground storm vault. But should a 100-year storm event occur on the property, that slightly shaded gray area would be where the water would be contained to, and then an overland flow route should it be inundated or a point where the water cannot be retained in the property. An overland flow route is provided that would then provide that water relief out to Route 14, not to adjacent properties. The petitioner can provide additional information as well as the reasoning behind those changes. As a reminder, the petitioner is requesting a map amendment to rezone the property from B2 to B3. This slide summarizes the map amendment standards within the zoning ordinance as far as justification for support of map amendments. And likewise, the conditional use standards are also provided on this slide. Based off the information provided, staff is still recommending support of the conditional use for the car wash facility and map amendment, subject to the conditions listed in your staff report and the revised staff report provided for this evening.
Thank you very much, Mr. Simmons. So, gentlemen, I know we've had a little bit of a delay in this application, so I want to give all the members at the ZBA any opportunity to ask Mr. Simmons additional questions at this time, if you have any.
Will we be hearing from the owners of Lake Julian tonight?
Yeah, you recall, Mr. Jasper, that we had left that open to the public, so I anticipate that at least one person would be speaking. But before we get to going back to that, I just want to double check that all the members of the ZPA are comfortable at this time.
Yep.
Okay. So for the petitioner, I don't know if there's anything additional to add. I did say to the gentleman earlier that we do not have a full complement of ZPA members, and we now have 5. but we would normally have 7. So I just want to make sure that you're comfortable going forward with tonight's proceedings. Okay, thank you very much. So is there any additional comments you would like to make as a petitioner?
Good evening to the board. My name is Alan Jacob, JACOB. My business address is 950 North Milwaukee Avenue, Suite 329, Glenview, Illinois, 60025. I represent the petitioner for this car wash at 45 Northwest Highway. Everything that Mr. Simmons addressed was accurate. There's just one additional item I think was a concern of the adjacent neighbor, and that was the material used, the soap, the chemicals that are being used to wash these cars. We went out and found marine grade material to use in the car wash process. And this material is primarily used to clean lakes, oceans, boats, things like that. It's very aquatic friendly, so it won't do any harm to any aquatic life if that any kind of leakage occurs. But I think the changes to the property itself, the walls, adds that barrier to make sure that any stormwater excess is contained within the property. Aside from that, there's no other updates we want to make. What about the grade for the adjacent? You want to address that? Yeah, the grade.
No, we'll address that.
Okay.
Okay. Before you adjourn, Mr. Jacobs, gentlemen, questions for the petitioner?
So the MDS sheets are new, so the new marine grade is different from the proposal from what we had before?
Yes.
So
Okay.
I think Brian did include
Yeah.
the new SDS
Yep.
sheets. It
Yep.
should, at the top, they should be from green or.
Yep, okay.
Guess being my field. So, I mean, I read through the MSDS sheets, and it might be and if it's marine gradable, that's fantastic. But I guess my only concern, and some of these they cover the hazards more than the cleanups and spills and things like that. So every one of them under disposal considerations, safe to wash into waste systems. So do we have if they're held within the building, there's no potential for them to get into the storm system, correct?
No, because they're in sealed drums inside the unit, and I think we have a photo of that.
No, I know I had seen that one before. Yeah, that they were inside. I just
Right.
wanted
They're not open
and
containers.
The interior of the I don't have my design plans with me, but the interior of the building, as I recall, went to sewer,
Yes.
not storm.
It goes
Yes,
to,
correct.
it goes to storm, but it gets filtered through a triple basin system prior to going out.
That was all the outside or all the inside?
On the
On
inside.
the inside.
On the
Okay.
inside of the building.
Yeah.
All right.
Mr. O'Loughlin, other questions?
No, I'm good.
Okay. Mr. Jasper? Mr. Graciano? So I have one question, Mr. Jacobs, maybe two. How many facilities do you currently operate?
I think we're developing 15.
Facilities. Hi, Nick with Car Wash Pro Designers.
Thank you very much.
600 North Michigan Avenue, Chicago, Illinois, 60611.
Thank you.
We have built full-service washes nationwide for years, so we've had, several dozen washes live. The express wash is kind of a new niche, and we're doing we don't even call it a wash. It's more like an auto spa. The buildings are designed to be appealing to look like a bank. We're environmentally friendly, even more now that we've met with the trout farm owners. So I've gotten a lot of schooling that I typically didn't have as a result prior to this.
Yes.
Noise impact, sound, lighting impact. We address a lot of the issues that were raised by the board in the event that somebody comes through the parking lot with lights be flashing at the neighbors in the back. We've controlled all of that. So we don't have any of this particular facility, but we have, it's the express wash is considered the pool house, but we've built full service washes. They're like the mansions. They have everything in them.
Have you ever had a problem at any of your other facilities?
No, in fact, we have a facility that we built in Des Plaines, Illinois, and it's considered their worst flood area in town. And the building itself has never been underwater. So there's no situation we've ever had. I mean, in fact, when the civil engineer was working with this, I was like, can we bring this thing to a 1,000-year flood scenario? He goes, he just doesn't have NOAA's number. So we just can't get that.
Yeah.
So, I think that we built this thing in such a way that in the event that absolute worst case, and by the way, we were invited to the trout farm. We spent a lot of time with them. We got a good tour of the farm. They were very polite. They opened their doors to us. In fact, we were even in one of the homes. So they were very kind, spent, a good amount of time with them. In fact, David wanted us to build the Fridays or something like that. Olive Garden. Tried to convince us several times to build up an Olive Garden, but we got a good feel for them. You could tell that they seriously love what they have. They've had it for 100 years. And when we went back to the client said, do whatever it takes to satisfy them so that in the event that some crazy flood happens, that they're still protected.
Thank you very much. I don't have any additional questions. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, this is the part of the meeting now where I open it up to the public. And we had intentionally left it open to the public. We never anticipated we'd see this many people here for this particular petition, but here we are. I think there might be at least one of the members in the audience that might like to speak, but I'm not certain. But anyone that would like to discuss this particular petition is welcome to do so.
Good evening. David Miller, 65 Highway 14, Cary, Illinois, Lake Julian, and my daughter.
Christina Anderson, 65 Highway 14, Cary, Illinois.
Welcome.
You want to talk about the chemical with Mike
Yeah, me
said?
too.
Yeah.
Okay. What I said before about biodegradable, the whole thing of it needing to be capable of decomposing by bacteria or other, living organisms within 6 months. It'll take 24 hours for us to be infected if anything happens. I appreciate that they have tried and they are doing a great job at trying to prevent anything from happening. The fear of it happening it's just a risk I just can't get behind. A friend of ours who is also a biologist and a trout farmer said that we should probably try and get 100% guarantee of absolute no runoff because it will wipe us out, and the cleanup, I don't know how we would be able to even afford that. It's not just loss, it's phase 1, phase 2, phase 3 cleanups, which it would just be detrimental. So that's my thing. I'm all about the chemicals.
Is the stormwater trap a contained unit, or is it leach into the ground when your stormwater?
Mike Elliott with Terra Consulting and Park Ridge, 600 Bussey Avenue. The vaults would have to be sealed. Typically concrete underground vault, no open bottom. So it'd be a water
So
tight.
it's retention, it retains it and lets it out into the city.
Exactly.
And the overflow would be overland, you're saying? What's the capacity of the
So
storm trap?
the storm trap's designed for 100-year event, the standard for pretty much all our development in the area. Beyond that, it would still have the parking lot would fill with water, so there's more storage that I can't necessarily calculate. But then, worst case, 500-year, it spills beyond your property. Yeah. So that's the intent.
Thank you.
Right, because the stormwater, we all know what kind of storms we've had. I've seen rain coming from all different directions off it. There one map that they sent you with the topo showing water runs off from Lake Julian and the Jacks channels is 30 feet off. I don't know where they got those elevation changes. It's very inaccurate. I don't know if do you have that? The one you sent me? The one?
Yeah, so I can speak about the mic, but that is yeah.
Dad, I have it.
So that's available data on, part of our GIS system, which is the public can go to any location. Google Earth is used on it. It's about 2-foot accuracy, so it doesn't have high detail of your property or anybody's property. It's a regional.
So, Mr. Miller, you're going to forgive me just for a moment.
Yeah.
I need to say this publicly, but I want to, on behalf of all of us, keep an open mind. The intent of the public comment section is not necessarily to be a debate between the public and the petitioner. It's simply the process, as you know well, is designed to make your comments.
Well, my concerns are the information we're given isn't the whole data of what the chemicals entail. I don't think we've been given proper We weren't notified of what their plans were until 3 days ago. I don't think we had enough information given to us to make a proper blessing of this. I know they're trying to work with us, but I don't think they've been very forthcoming, that it's like, once again, the 11th hour, we're getting this information. And I don't believe it's ready to be, you guys be voted on into it until we really truly have all the information. Their site map is way off. You know, it shows that our bottom lake runs into Jack's Channels, which is a 40-foot elevation change. You know, these maps are aerial photograph. They're just an idea. They're not very accurate. I'm very concerned on this whole project that I don't believe it should be given the blessing at this time to move on to the village board, that I really wish we'd have more time and a little more information, because it could be detrimental to our business. And, you know, and as your comprehensive plan says, their plan doesn't show this as being part of what should go on that property. That I don't think we're following our comprehensive plan that I helped work with many members here also, that I would wish this to be either continued or we get our Olive Garden.
Thank you, Mr. Miller.
All right, any other questions?
Comments? Okay, before I close the public comments section, I know many of you were not here for this previously, but anyone that's here is welcome to comment.
Good evening, I'm Charles Kraft. I live at 28635 West Old Hideaway Road down on the river. And I drive past this site multiple times every day. I absolutely can't go anywhere without going past it. I also can't go anywhere without going past 5 or 6 other car washes in under a couple of miles. So while I respect the engineering concerns, the environmental concerns, light pollution, noise pollution, I respect all of those concerns of the neighbors. No amount of engineering, in my opinion, and I'm a lifelong builder and developer, makes this a good site for a car wash, given the development we already have in the area. We will find in relatively few years' time that we have a blight of car washes, all right? Just like we have a blight of old too small Walmarts and things like that. This is going to be a problem probably a lot sooner than anybody would think. What Cary needs is more in keeping with the comprehensive plan that was developed earlier, and that is a walkable town that supports family life and not contributes to traffic and noise and things like that. Now, if we really need another car wash, I understand why the folks that run the car wash and develop these want these prime locations for the very same reason that every drugstore wants to be on a corner, and that's profit maximization, all right? But that does not come anywhere near maximizing the quality of life for the residents, especially the close-by residents. So while I respect environmental concerns, engineering concerns, and profit motive concerns, my primary concern for my town, where I've raised my children and my family for the last 27 years, is quality of life. We have more than enough car washes now. Some of them have even been upgraded recently. I use them myself from time to time. We simply don't need this kind of development. So while I respect a businessman's right to build and develop, and I respect a neighbor's right to protect their centuries-old family business, which is an institution, a fixture of life in Cary that I've grown up my children with and taken my Cub Scouts and Boy Scouts there. It's simply the wrong development, and I really wish that we would probably do a job that was more in keeping with our comprehensive plan, and even show maybe a little bit more a strong idea for a walkable Cary from East Main all the way to West Main. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Kraft. Anyone else?
I just have a quick comment. Kathleen Park, 125 Carlisle Court, Cary, Illinois. On your stormwater or your business water retention, When we were putting in the new commuter parking lot, for stormwater retention, what they did there is had a gigantic, you guys are in the business, so you know what I'm talking about, with a restricted outflow that could actually contain the stuff and then let it go out. Are you going to have one of these things in this development because you need it? So that you know the law where water cannot leave at a faster rate once developed than before developed. If you take care of that, I'm for you. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Good evening.
Good evening.
My name is Mark Huber. I live at 262 East Main. Very happy that I came here tonight because I was unaware that this was taking place. And my dog's going to be very disappointed because I literally walked straight out of my house to the field there. My concern is that for the residents that are right, that will be viewing this, what appears to be the turnaround where the car lanes are, is there going to be any sort of barrier or visual, shrubbery or something so that we're not having
Yeah. Well, we'll try to be open-minded and flexible about this through the public comment. This was previously addressed to
Okay.
everyone, but since the gentleman's asking, that's been addressed, but I think Nick wants to readdress it.
So the main street in the back is 8 feet higher than our site. So we have a berm that's going up. In fact, we're enhancing the berm. So the lights themselves are faced at almost a 9 foot or 10 with the berm.
Well, at this point, no berm, it's a slope that's got to reach up to the road, yeah.
So it's 8 foot of
They're
difference.
8 feet lower.
And there'll be landscaping on that.
And then we actually have a landscape. If you go back, you can show we.
I was just curious because I
all
see
along
that,
Main.
Originally.
Okay. Yeah, and it's a very very heavily traveled route of passage for people coming from the east to get to the light first thing in the morning. They've recently, within the last 5 years or 7 years, have narrowed part of the roadway and taken part of our front yard, so to speak. I have people that come flying down, from down by the river, and will hit, the curb right in front of my house, and I just happen to be right on the corner. So I don't know where the traffic is going to be coming in from, but it's already congested area at this point. So, I don't know that, adding more congestion in that area is going to be probably the best, but as long as there's not entering off of East Main, they're coming from, I'm assuming, beyond.
We're actually really close to Northwest Highway.
Okay, perfect. All right, thank you very much.
Thank you. So anyone else would like to speak?
Hi. Good evening. Brian Jaber, 23 Jefferson Lane. Something that hasn't been brought up that occurs to me as a guy who runs a business, a billboard company that everyone likes to try to put out of business because billboards aren't real popular. I know that sometimes when a new business comes to town, there's a lot of objections to that particular business. One of the things that occurs to me, because it's deeply embedded in our business, if one of my billboards falls off the side of a road, hits the school bus, we have a big problem. Well, it may not hit a school bus, but it could hit 2,000 fish, okay, and that's their business. So with that being said, what kind of insurance policy is being offered? What kind of protection is being offered the day after, 2,000 fish go belly up to keep the business afloat, to bring in phase 1, phase 2, phase 3 level protection for all of this? I'm accustomed to sometimes, in Dave Miller's situation, sometimes the board has to do what they believe is best, and sometimes that's not always what we want as a business owner in the community. One thing that can make that a little better is the guarantee that there's $5 or $10 million in an insurance policy sitting there for to take care of a disaster like this. And I don't know that 5 or 10 is what the number should be, but some level of protection occurs to me that that might be in the best interest of not only Dave Miller's property, but frankly of the village entirely.
Thank you very much. Is there anyone else like to speak?
Good evening, Board. Matt Robillard, 128 Cherry Street, about a driver wedge away from the new business. And I'm here for another reason, because of the rezoning of our subdivision. So this interests me because I wasn't aware of this before. 2 questions. Could we flip back to the noise impact slide? Can't read the bottom. What are the hours of operation? I apologize if this has been covered before.
Yes, but that's all right.
Hours are Monday through Saturday, 7 a.m. to 9 p.m., and Sunday, 8 a.m. to 6 p.m.
All right. Well, that's a typical business hour, so I can't really fault them for that. However, I live off of 2nd Avenue, if you're familiar with that area, which is, under the best circumstances, difficult to get ingress, egress out of that neighborhood. There's only one way in, one way out. I drive by this business constantly on my way to and from work every day, 5 times a week. I'm not crazy about any project that increases traffic flow or traffic congestion along that corridor. It's difficult already. So I can only speak for myself. None of my neighbors, I don't know who else is here tonight for the other zoning issue, but it's probably a pretty sure bet that they would feel the same way. Across the street, it's not as big of an issue for us. They have a lot more options of getting in and out of their neighborhoods. So that's my own opinion.
Thank you very much. All right, folks, one more kick at the can. Anyone else have any comments? All right, we're going to close the public portion of the meeting, and we'll bring it back in. And before I call this motion, gentlemen, any other questions that you have among yourself? Mr. Jasper? No? So I actually had one. I haven't lived in the community as long as some of you have. But my question is that I have a recollection when we moved here that where the CVS is presently, I thought someone told me there used to be a gas station there.
Gas station, yeah.
And if there was a gas station, was there ever a problem with runoff in gasoline or any other kind of environmental problem that got into Lake Julian? I don't know. I'm going to ask Mr. Simmons if he would know.
I've been here longer.
From the slide shown here shows the development history of the property. Back in 2005, you can see the various uses that were on that corner, which includes a former Citgo gas station. Was up in Clark, sorry, it's correct. Clark Station was in this location. There was other office uses, a bank, flower shop, and some industrial uses on the property as well. There may have been, I can't speak towards if there was any runoff issues that occurred from those properties onto the subject property, but due to the natural grades of the area, stormwater generally runs from west to east here towards the river, so any flow of surface water would have flowed in that general direction.
Okay, thank you very much. So gentlemen, again, before I call it, go ahead, Mr. O'Laughlin.
Yeah, I guess there's one thing that's clicking in my brain still, and it comes back to environmental. With the disposal in the SDS sheets for all of these, it says make sure you properly dispose of into a waste system, which tells me not storm, that tells me city sewer. And I understand the triple catch basin, but that's mainly for oil and grease, unless you have a different filtration
It still
system.
goes out to the sanitary.
It's going to the sanitary.
It connects to sanitary. And
I mean, we're talking about the interior of the building. Everything must go to sanitary.
Right, okay, because I thought you had said that the interior was going to storm.
I think he mentioned, I don't think storm should have been the word used. But
Yeah, no, he said, you
Yeah,
said
I'm
storm,
sorry.
but I meant
I
sanitary.
meant sanitary, right.
Okay,
Obviously,
all right.
Everything that's inside bathrooms, sinks.
Well, obviously, those
all
have to
that
go to
goes
sanitary, but I didn't know about extra water, if it was going into sanitary or sewer.
yeah, we would have to file for an IEPA permit.
Yeah, definitely. And our system can handle it coming from,
Yes, the lift station that's there right now has very low flows that go into it. So this property, any sanitary sewer that comes out of this facility will directly tie into that lift station on the southeast corner of the site, and then would be pumped back into the system from there. But there's adequate capacity to handle this development.
okay, thank you.
I just want to say I'm disappointed that they only did this to a 100-year flood.
Can I correct? I'll add to that when you're done.
I'm done.
Okay. So actually the design, what I tried to do is, 100-year, if we can get to this exhibit.
I don't have-
this one in your system?
It's not in the system.
Oh, okay. So essentially, what I tried to do is.
It's all right.
as I'm
I
presenting
think you want to
guys,
show the public too, so the camera can see it.
You know, it's 100 years. What we have is design information for basically any project we're doing in Illinois or anywhere really in the U.S. But so what I made an assumption because the data I have, I basically assumed not one storm sewer was working in this area. So this is the natural drainage area based on the aerials and the basically Google Earth background. But all this water assumed no detention, nothing upstream was being captured or diverted to make it worst case. So I assumed everything, all the residential and commercial area drains directly into his site. That's not happening and really can't happen to come in here. But to make it worst that I could, I felt that was the best way to do it based on our worst case design storm. So I don't have a level, I can't tell you whether it's 500, 600, but it's way, way over. I mean, usually you design just for your site, not for a whole neighborhood, you know, for a whole region. So yeah, I can't say what the storm is, but it's way above 100.
All right, gentlemen, I'm going to call the motion. At this time, the chair will entertain a motion to recommend to the Village Board of Trustees approval of, one, a map amendment to rezone the vacant property located at 45 Northwest Highway from B3 to B2, and number two, a conditional use for a car wash facility subject to the conditions listed in the staff report.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you very much, gentlemen. Any additional discussion on the motion? Mr. Simmons, would you call the roll?
Williams?
No.
Graziano?
Yes.
O'Laughlin?
No.
Jasper?
Yes.
Corey?
Yes. So you have a favorable recommendation, but just so the public is aware, what happens now is this goes forward to the elected officials, and they will become the final arbiter of our discussion tonight. So you have a favorable recommendation, and what I would humbly recommend is you stay in touch with our Director of Community Development on the next steps. Did you have a comment, Scott?
Just to clarify, it takes 4 votes for favorable.
Oh, that's right, because of the, we don't have the large quorum. Thank you for the correction. So there you go. So now this is going to require a little bit more introspection by our elected officials. So I was just doing a democratic process here versus the fourth. Thank you very much. That's why we have council. Yeah.
What just happened?
So
there's,
there's 3 votes that are in support. In order to get a positive recommendation out of the ZPA, you need at least 4 to carry the motion. So the motion with only 3 votes is failed, but it still goes on to the village board. But at that level, you will need at least 4 votes of the trustees to support.
Yeah. So just for the public's benefit, tonight we normally have 7 members assembled here. And you might remember we were talking about the quorum at the beginning of the meeting. We need at least 4 to begin our meeting. And thank you very much for the correction. I appreciate that. So we don't have enough votes to carry it forward. So now this more or less a supermajority would be needed at the next level of the elected officials. Yeah.
Okay.
All right.
So, but we have moved beyond public.
You're going to the elected officials.
Correct.
Yeah, you're moving forward. And that would have occurred either way, for the record.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, give them a speech on that. Or just a
advisory group.
Yeah, we're the advisory group to the village board, folks. So whether we recommend or don't recommend, it automatically goes to the village board from that point. Like I said, we're not passing a go-ahead, you're okay to good to go. We're telling the village board what we feel in our decision is yay or nay. And so it goes to them regardless.
Okay. That'd be March 5th. March 5th will be discussed,
yeah.
6 p.m.
So in addition to making a mistake on that, go.
I believe we have another hearing on March 5th in another village. Is there another date available?
March 19th would be the next available date.
March
2
19th?
weeks after. Sure.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
That works. Do that.
Thank you very much, gentlemen. Thanks for your flexibility. And We're now going to move on to the rest of our agenda tonight, which primarily revolves around the UDO. You saw that we tried as best we could to keep an open mind about the public speaking. When we get into the public speaking part, again, we're going to keep an open mind, but it's not designed to be a debate amongst this group and yourselves or with the village staff, but we'll keep an open mind as we work through this process. As I look at the agenda, everyone, there's no fewer now than about 11, 12 more cases related to the UDO. We try to put the heavier ones up front so you'll get a taste for what it is we're trying to accomplish here. And before I begin, gentlemen, to call the next case, I just want to make sure that all of you are comfortable with what we're about to embark upon now. If there's any questions in advance. You're going to be cutting out? You're going to stay?
Next question.
Sure. No, we were trying to discuss that earlier, so thank you very much, Council. So what Council was suggesting is that here we are 10 to 7, and all of you are here. Obviously, it's Valentine's Day, and we're discussing, what is the appropriate amount of time to go forward. I think at some point, we'll make a decision about taking a bio break, and then maybe we'll get in, if we get into the 10 o'clock hour, I think we'll stop and pause and say, okay, might we be going home and continuing tonight's activities to a future date. So, again, we'll keep an open mind. Each case requires the process that you just observed with the car wash is each and every case that we're about to go forward now. So there's a process and procedure to each of these. So with that, and thank you, Council, very much, I'm going to now call our next case, which is Village Case Number 19 ZPA 01001. This is for the Village of Cary, a text amendment related to the new Unified Development Ordinance, and 2 map amendments related to zoning map for the Village of Cary. And over to you, Mr. Simmons.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As this board is very familiar, this has been a long process for the village to go through. Essentially, what we're proposing to do for the benefit of the public is we're updating the village's development regulations by combining the zoning code, sign code, subdivision ordinance, and other regulations into a single document, and then updating them to current planning practices or design standards more appropriate for the type of development that has occurred and potentially could occur within the village. With this process, we've had a number of workshops before the zoning board to discuss the changes. We appreciate the interest that you have in attending this evening. I will go through a presentation. I'll kind of give an overview of the changes that are proposed in the ordinance. But then at the end, obviously, if there are any questions from the ZPA and also for the public comment portion, you're welcome to discuss that as well. Little background on the process. The village, as has already been discussed this evening, adopted a comprehensive plan back in February of 2015. One of the recommendations of that plan is to review our zoning regulations and update them. In May of 2016, we contracted with Houseo Levine and Associates. Both John Houseo and Jackie Wells are here from the firm. They were very integral in helping us throughout this process to develop the ordinance that you have before you this evening. Specifically to that, we had community workshops that were held back in September of 2016, where we invited the public in for an open house session to discuss the impacts of the UDO and their plan. That notice went out in water bills at the time. We had workshops to discuss the commercial areas, residential areas, and then also one specifically with the zoning board that evening. Following that time, we had a joint meeting with the ZPA and the Committee of the Whole in March of 2017 that reviewed the analysis of the existing code and kind of the areas that need to be updated or potentially modified. And then throughout late 2017 throughout last year, had several workshops to actually draft the language, discuss that until we got it to the document that you are receiving this evening. Again, a joint ZPA and COW meeting was held in December of last year where the proposed ordinance was presented. We had an open house last month where the public was invited to come in and review the changes. And then finally, the public hearing this evening for the proposed changes to the ordinance and proposed zoning map. Again, the process is trying to update our regulations. This slide shows kind of the timelines where we're at from the project kickoff through the draft and final ordinance this evening. Main goal of the project is to align with the comprehensive plan, the directives of the comprehensive plan, so that can guide development of the community going forward. An overview of the UDO, there are 11 chapters. Probably the most interesting to residents or those that are in attendance tonight would be Chapter 2, which establishes the zoning districts and the standards within those. However, there's various chapters that have additional regulations, which I'll go into more detail throughout the presentation here. Chapter 1 is carried over from our existing code. There are no changes. Basically establishes the intent of the zoning ordinance and why we have regulations within the community. Chapter 2 speaks towards the existing zoning districts within the community. As part of this process, we looked at the number of zoning classifications that were within the village and looked at trying to reduce them in scope because a number of them are very similar as far as their regulations. Overall, we originally started with 17 districts, and as proposed tonight, we're seeking to collapse those down to 12 districts. Some of the changes within the individual districts are or specifically on the slide, you can see the R1A district is being eliminated, which currently is not being utilized in the village. The B4 and BP districts are proposed to be eliminated as there are very few properties that have that zoning classification currently. And then also the PO park and open space districts 1 through 4 are being consolidated into a single district. And also with the proposed update, we're seeking to create a new R2A district, which I'll get into more detail further in the slide, but that is to speak towards existing development that's already occurred. Some of the changes to the bulk standards table that are proposed are to increase the lot coverage in the single family neighborhoods, the R2A and the R2 district from 35 to 45%. That change is primarily to reflect variations that have been supported by the village in the past and also some existing development that's occurred in those areas. The setback in the R3 district is reduced from 50 feet again to 30 feet, also based on variation history for projects that have been approved since the last code update. We also reorganized the table of permitted uses to make it more concise and easier to use for the public to determine what uses are appropriate for different zoning classifications. This map shows the existing zoning for the village. Again, the 17 zoning districts are illustrated in the left-hand portion of the slide. And as proposed, we are proposing to reduce that down to 12, and this would be the proposed zoning map going forward. There are 3 primary changes that impact parcels within the village so for the areas that are proposed to be rezoned, which are shown on the slide on the right-hand side. First is the creation of the R2A district, which will address existing nonconformities for the area that's specifically proposed to rezone. Second is the consolidation of the park and open space districts. Again, those 4 districts down to 1, but then also rezoning those existing parks that are not in one of those classifications now to the park and open space district. And then finally, the elimination of the B4 and the BP zoning districts, which comprise about 17 parcels within the village. Going deeper into the R2A district rezoning, this slide shows the existing R2 district is highlighted in yellow, which currently that district requires a minimum lot size of just under 11,000 square feet. What you see on the slide here in purple are all the properties within the village that are currently zoned R2, which do not comply with that minimum requirement. So all of those properties are non-conforming as of today. What is proposed in the UDO is to reduce the minimum lot size for the R2 district down to 8,500 square feet, which will bring the majority of those properties into compliance. This slide shows with that new 8,500 square foot lot size requirement, how many properties are still not compliant with that provision. So as the proposal for the R2A district would be to decrease the lot size for a specific area defined within the village that has the majority of those non-conforming lots, even with that reduction in lot area, so that they would conform to village ordinances going forward. The minimum lot size in that district is proposed to be 6,250 square feet, which the majority of the properties in that area would comply with. Just an example of 3 examples of areas as far as how this would impact residential, existing residential development in the community. This example looks at the corner of Eldon and Lloyd Street. Specifically, as you can see in the slide, the column on the left-hand side shows the existing R2 requirements as far as lot size, lot width, depth, and et cetera. The center column shows the existing development, based on aerial footage as far as the lot sizes, the lot width, lot depth. And then the final column, the R2A district, shows what the proposed regulations would be. As you can see in the image, each property has several issues that they currently do not conform to the village's requirements. Specifically, over these 12 lots, there are 44 zoning requirements or zoning, not violations, but non-conforming situations that those properties don't comply with our current regulations. As proposed under the R2A district, for this example, there's an average of a little over 3.5 nonconformities per lot. With the proposed rezoning, all of those properties would be compliant with our zoning ordinance. All the nonconformities on those lots would be eliminated. They would comply with the lot width, lot depth, lot coverage requirements, so that individuals that live in this area would be able to reinvest in their homes without requiring zoning relief. It would make them compliant with our zoning process. Similar example, a little bit further to the west of that site. This is the intersection of Alma Terrace and Sander Lane. As you can see, similar tables shown in the slide there, across those 11 lots. There are 64 existing nonconformities, a little less than 6 per lot. Again, with the proposed rezoning, most of these properties will be brought into compliance. However, this area, there are some nonconformities that will remain upon the rezoning. Specifically, the lot depth will not conform to our regulations, and then some of these homes are built closer to the roadway, so the front yard does not comply. However, those uses would be allowed to continue to remain in this area. Excuse me. Where they be existing non-conforming, their existing developments at the time of the rezoning, so they would be grandfathered in from that perspective and allowed to remain going indefinitely. Should one of these buildings be demolished or destroyed for any reason from a fire or other event, they would need to conform to the zoning regulations when they're redeveloped as far as setbacks, and may need to get additional relief. But the amount of relief under the current code from previous code is significantly reduced under the proposed rezoning process. A third example, and the final example, is looking at some properties along Pin Oak Circle. These are some of the smallest lots that we have in the village. Again, across 12 lots, there's 64 nonconformities, a little over 5 per property. As part of the rezoning, there's various standards that will remain, the depth and rear yard setbacks for the existing homes. But for the most part, there's a reduction of 3.4 nonconformities per lot in this area. Again, by rezoning these properties to this district will allow these homeowners to potentially make investments, building decks or patios, which they might not otherwise be able to do under our code currently without going through the lengthy variance process. Is there any questions regarding those examples or slides? All right, thank you. The second scenario, which is proposed for rezoning, is proposing to rezone all of the parks within the community to the new PO district. As previously mentioned, back in 2011, the village created the existing 4 districts. Since that time period, only 3 parks have been rezoned to one of those 4 districts, including Lions Park, Caper Park, and Hoffman Park. As proposed on the ordinance, we are seeking to consolidate those 4 districts into one singular district and then rezone all of the appropriate parks throughout the community to that park and open space district. So the existing parks would remain and be continued to operate, and then would have to comply from a use standpoint, any uses that would be proposed in the park who need to comply with the use requirements for those districts. By rezoning these properties to the park and open space from their existing classifications of either R2 or various zoning classifications, it ensures that they're preserved as park and open spaces, so that if the park district or property owner ever were to sell them to a developer, an example, they would have to go back through the zoning process to amend the property or rezone the property, which then the surrounding property owners would be notified of those zoning changes. So that change affects a large area of some large properties throughout the community, and that was a reason for a large notification that went out, but it's basically to ensure that the parks are appropriately zoned for park and recreational uses. The third scenario that's impacting rezoning is specifically related to the elimination of the BP and the B4 zoning districts, and I have these images on larger slides that follow this as well, but as mentioned, the two districts are affect very few properties within the village. That the B4 district affects 5 parcels in the community, and the BP I think is about 11 or 12 parcels. By eliminating those districts, we're proposing to rezone those properties into other zoning classifications that are appropriate for the existing uses that exist on the property, and then potential development going forward as well. First off, one of the parcels that's proposed to be rezoned is actually Village Hall. Is zoned BP currently. Proposing to rezone that to the R1 district, which is consistent with the neighboring residential area directly to our west. Municipal building would be permitted use within that zoning classification. The two senior developments, the assisted living facility on the corner of Silver Lake Road and Three Oaks Road, and then the Cary Senior Living project, which is currently under construction. Both would be proposed to be rezoned. The former is zone B4, and the current project under construction is zone BP. Those two properties would be rezoned to the R3 district, which is appropriate for senior housing developments from the community. Parcels that are proposed to be rezoned to B2 include the discussion, the case that was discussed earlier this evening, the CVS and the vacant property on Northwest Highway. That's the one parcel or one area that is not eliminated from a B4 or BP district, but that is a proposal to rezone to be consistent with zoning classifications already in that area. But specifically to B2 is the property that fronts Route 31 near the Meyer parcel. Specifically for the Chalet Farm annexation agreement, calls that area to be rezoned, zoned as BP, but should that BP district be eliminated for any reason in the future, that it would be rezoned to B2. So that zoning proposal is consistent with the annexation agreement for that property. Finally, the proposed parcels to be rezoned, sorry, there's two other maps. The parcels to be rezoned to B3 are shown on this slide include two B4 zones that are located along Cary Algonquin Road, the Cary Oaks Plaza and the Two Penny Farm property, the former assisted living facility and the dentist facility in corner of Cary Algonquin and Main Street, and then the office development next to, that includes the post office, Silver Lake Road office development, and then some office area along Feinberg Court would be rezoned to B3. Also, the Goddard School property, the village-owned parcels that front along Industrial Drive and back up to Caper Park and Cimarron, and then the vacant Caper parcel on the north of Industrial Drive would be rezoned to B3 from existing BP zoning classifications. Finally, the Stryker property, which is currently zoned BP, would be proposed to rezone to M, limited manufacturing. That would be consistent with zoning classifications for other similar uses across the street on Alexander Court and further to the east along Industrial Drive. And the existing facility would be appropriate today, or would be an allowed use today within the M district and also going forward under the proposed UDO. Any questions regarding the proposed amendments to the zoning map at this point?
Gentlemen? No? Continue.
Going forward through the rest of the code, various chapters speak towards additional requirements as far as how individuals could utilize or enhance their property. Specifically, Chapter 3 speaks towards use provisions that has additional requirements for various uses that require additional attention throughout the text. Specifically, regulations for solar energy collection systems for roof-mounted solar, ground-mounted solar equipment is proposed, consistent with the type of variations or items that the village has received over the past year or so. Added sections regarding outdoor seating, which was carried over from the liquor code, and also requirements for wireless service facilities, cell towers, things along those lines. Chapter 4 has development standards that speak towards the actual development of sites, specifically looking at parking lots, off-street parking requirements, fences and walls, requirements along from that perspective. Most of these areas were updated, and specifically the area that had the most TLC to it was the landscape ordinance. As John aptly uses some of our images in his presentations on how not to show things in your zoning code. But these are various updates here that bring it more in compliance with existing standards, access to public streets, off-street parking, and then also bringing fences and walls requirements from our building code is currently where that's housed into the land use regulation section. Chapter 5 speaks towards signage requirements within the community, specifically since our code was drafted in the early 2000s. There's been a number of case law that's occurred through the Supreme Court that has required portions of our code to be rewritten, where our code currently, as of today, is not compliant with U.S. law, if you will, for free speech or commercial speech. So some of the changes in this area are to bring it in compliance from that perspective, and then make consistent across the board as far as commercial properties, clear and precise requirements as far as how large of a sign you can have, where the signs can be located at, and then the information that can be displayed in those signs, specifically provisions for permanent signs, temporary signs, prohibited signs, and various standards throughout the ordinance. There are also a number of graphics in that section that illustrate what the code is requiring from a visual perspective. The subdivision regulations, again, speak towards the subdivision of land within the community. Most of this section was carried over from our existing code, but there were some areas that were updated to speak towards the type of development that should additional subdivisions occur. Most of Cary is built out, but there may be opportunities for additional growth for lands, and should additional subdivisions come into the village, this section speaks towards those types of areas and the requirements for subdividing land within the village of Cary. Chapter 7, Plan Development Ordinance, is a significant rewrite, again, from our existing code. We do have provisions for plan development within the community, but it does require that it only apply towards properties that are over 40 acres in size, which going forward, there aren't many opportunities to utilize that. We only have one plan development that has been approved for the Foxford Hills subdivision. This ordinance basically allows for a developer to approach the village for the redevelopment of property, and allows for more creative approaches to development that may not adhere to the rigidity of a zoning ordinance. So if they submit a petition, it goes through a similar zoning process for a variation or any other conditional use, would be reviewed before the village board, a conceptual basis, and then go through the public hearing process for adoption, but allows the flexibility in response or approvals from a standpoint to allow for better architecture, landscaping, other enhancements to a site that would make the development more appropriate for its current location and also adjacent land uses. With the requirements, we're requiring that no non-single family development on a lot that is greater than 2 acres in size will have to go through the process, and then any development within the B1 or B3R districts would also go through the PUD process. That requires that anything within our downtown or the adjacent B3R district along Route 14 Main Street to the east or any larger commercial developments would go through the PUD process, which allows more control or review of developments as opposed to going through straight zoning. Just an example, right now, if you look at the Selke property as an example, it's a 14-plus acre site. Under our current regulations, if a developer came in and wanted to build a shopping center or a grocery store, those are permitted uses by right within that zoning district. They can come in and pull a building permit without having to go through a zoning process. This would change that process where that site's over 2 acres. There would be additional review before this board and also the village board for approval of a project. Basically, it puts a burden for approving a project on the petitioner or the applicant to go through the process, but also allows for more public input on those projects as well. And this slide just shows some of the standards for review, looking at the comprehensive plan, impact on other property, impact on public facilities, parking, traffic, adequate buffering. It's about 8 pages of regulations specifically for plan development, but it provides a clear and precise process for a developer of a larger property, how they can go through the process to get approval for a project or review for a project. This details, again, this is the process for going through from a submittal application to a zoning board and village board for approval. Chapter 8, this section speaks towards non-conforming uses and also buildings. It's primarily a carryover from our existing zoning ordinance. Any use that's legally existing at the time that our code is established would allow it to remain under this standard that doesn't comply with the regulations. Until a point where it's damaged, destroyed, or removed from that standpoint, then any abandonment would need to conform to the regulations going forward. This is essentially a grandfather clause for any development that's already occurred or uses that are within the village existing as of today. Chapter 9 speaks towards the board review process as far as how applications go through the process, public hearing before the ZPA and then on to the village board. Also discusses responsibilities of the my office for reviewing those applications and then slight modifications throughout the code. This area, again, didn't see a lot of changes, but most of them are highlighted in this slide. Chapter 10, administrative provisions, again, just shows the flow of going through the process from initiation of an application through village board approval. Again, this section was essentially carried over from our existing regulations. The final chapter is Chapter 11, which is definitions. This provides definitions that were updated to reflect the proposed changes in the ordinance. Outdated definitions were deleted, but this section specifically provides additional information for the interpretation of the code. So if there's a question on what was meant by a certain use or a certain standard, you can refer to the definition section to determine what is a front setback, what is a side yard setback, standards along those lines. As proposed, this is a modification to our existing regulations, so it is considered a text amendment to the zoning code, and it's a very substantial text amendment. But as with any petition that comes before the zoning board, there are various standards that need to be met to for the board to consider as part of a recommendation to the village board for support of that application. Specifically for text amendments, proposed amendment is not detrimental to the orderly development of the village. Amendment shall not be detrimental to or endanger the public health, safety, or general welfare of the community of the village, and the proposed amendment promotes the public interest, not solely in the interest of the applicant. As in with the applicability of the ordinance across the entire village, the intent is to, again with the R2A district, is to allow development that already has occurred in that area to conform to our existing regulations so that the ordinance as proposed will not be detrimental to those properties, but actually will relax the ordinance's requirements currently slightly so that those homeowners in that area could have more ability to reinvest in their property or improve their property without requiring a lengthy zoning process. Additionally, the proposed amendments are consistent with the directives of the comprehensive plan to encourage development review in the process of the plan development ordinance for projects that are larger within the community or within the downtown area, provides for greater review from the board, both the zoning board and village board and the community as a whole, to ensure that those projects are designed properly to fit the area. Likewise, with text amendment standards, there are also map amendment standards for rezoning. As we're proposing an update to the zoning map that has various modifications. This slide indicates the standards for review. Again, the R2A district and the PO district are specifically geared towards the type of development that has occurred in those areas, so that it will not be detrimental to the existing uses or permitted under, suitable for uses that are permitted under the zoning classification, and that are consistent with the trend of development already in that area. With the elimination of the B4 and the BP district, those properties are proposed to rezone to other zoning classifications that are very similar to the use